Hey everyone, this is Christian Heimel, host of Press Row. Thanks so much for listening to the following broadcast, courtesy of Public House Media.
Hi, this is Emily.
This is Lindsay.
And this is Elizabeth,
co-hosts of Beauties and Headcanons here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Once you are done with this episode, we hope you'll come check out our show, Beauties and Headcanons, where we talk nerdy to you about fandoms, fan fiction, and all pop culture for nerds that you can think of. A new show comes out every Friday.
Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Beauties and Headcanons. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hello and welcome to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. My name is Brice Burge.
Ivan Sanchez Carrasco. Today we're going to talk about the MLS playoffs. We have a Copa Libertadores final set as well in South America, and we're going to talk about Chinese Super League.
Your Soccer Passport is sponsored by Squadcast. As podcasters that deal with analysts and guests from all around the world, being able to record remotely is key. Current industry standards rely heavily on internet connection, but Squadcast changes that with a simple browser-based tool that requires no additional software to install. The audio is recorded locally as high-quality WAV files or MP3s now that the Squadcast upgrades have been made. Then those files are uploaded to the host computer. To get started with your remote podcasting recording experience, go to squadcast.fm for your 14-day free trial. All right, so big one, I think, obviously has to be MLS. I mean, when you get to a playoff structure as complicated, I would say, as the MLS is, at least in terms of the soccer world, there's a lot to be going on. We're recording this just minutes after Real Salt Lake and Sporting Kansas City drew 1-1 at Real Salt Lake at Rio Tinto. So it's a very interesting setup right now in terms of what to expect from the different games. We'll start with this one here as well. Albert Rusnak scored for Real Salt Lake. 9 minutes later, Diego Rubio scored for Sporting Kansas City. Both of those players are substitutes. Both of those players got a yellow card for unsportsmanlike behavior. So there wasn't a lot of difference in this game in terms of the score line because of the type of players involved. But what did you kind of get from this game to lead into the second leg?
I thought the first half was a little not a high quality as the second half. I thought the first half was kind of almost boring. And second half it really picked up. So Real Salt Lake's going to be killing themselves that they didn't leave with a victory. The Kansas City goal comes off of Romano mistake out of the back and goal, which sets up the goal for Sporting Kansas City. So now they leave with the away goal advantage. That forces Real Salt Lake to come out of the shell in the second leg and go for a goal. Interesting match, especially with the momentum that Real Salt Lake should have been carrying from their win earlier in the week against LAFC in the knockout game there. And for them to kind of not come out of the gates in the opening first half to really try to take advantage of that really, I think, hurt them a little bit because now they have a week to prepare, but now they're going down kind of drawing at home when they would probably feel they should have gone to win.
And that's the thing with how the playoffs set up. This round, the previous round was a knockout. One game, you're out. Very similar to what happens in most other sporting events in the United States. The difference is now that you have the legs, you have the more traditional soccer home-and-home scenario where you're going to Sporting Kansas City, and even with a tie, now the tiebreaker scenarios favors the home team in this case, because as long as there are 2+ goals scored by Sporting Kansas City, the higher scoring game favors the home team. The lower scoring game, on the other hand, favors the away team. So going into next week, winner moves on. And if there is a draw, then it's based on goals. So depending on how many goals are scored in that next game, If there's too many goals scored, then Real Salt Lake's still out of it. Also notable about that matchup is that Rusnak received a second yellow card because he received a yellow card against LAFC. And then also Marcelo Silva left the game with a groin injury. And nobody really knows at the time of recording how extensive that groin injury is. That'd be a big loss for Real Salt Lake in terms of stability, in terms of really moving that ball forward. So there's concerns if you're Real Salt Lake moving forward, while Vermez and company over in Sporting Kansas City has got to feel like they're very comfortable right now moving into that second leg.
And yeah, I mean, the away goal structure in these two-legged things now, you know, if Kansas City scores one, that kind of almost forces Real Salt Lake to have to score two and hope that they can hold Kansas City off. Well, I guess anything after, like, if it's a 2-2 draw or above, Real Salt Lake will go through on away goals for scoring more goals away. But I mean, that's still a lot to ask for, to have to score that many and hold your team back. So I think that was why it was a pretty lost opportunity this game, especially that it comes off a mistake. You're playing pretty well. You're keeping them at bay, and then for a keeper mistake, not clearing it properly, that just kind of, those aren't the breaks you need if you want to pull off an upset. And so with that, I think huge leg up for Kansas City entering that second leg, where a draw feels really good for them.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, is that Real Salt Lake, we kind of made mention of that. They knocked out LAFC to move along in the playoff structure. Real Salt Lake also limped in probably the most out of anybody in the Western Conference, where pretty much anybody that played in that opening round limped in, as we discussed last week on the show. But now you've got Real Salt Lake against Sporting Kansas City, the only tie. Let's kind of move along to the other games in the MLS Audi playoff. You've got Columbus. They had the upset against New York Red Bulls, 1-0. Portland, also the lower seed, pulled off the upset 2-1 at Seattle, but that's a rivalry matchup, so you never know. I mean, seeding does not come into play when you get into rivalry playoff matches. And the other big one, Atlanta scores just one goal against NYCFC before heading back down to Hotlanta. Out of these three games, which ones do you want to go to first? I'm guessing it's probably Portland.
I mean,
Seattle.
Yeah, we can go Portland, Seattle. I mean, definitely the most entertaining game out of all the games. And I'm not just saying that because I live in Portland and I'm a Portland guy. 3 goals in the first 30 minutes, 1-1 after 25. So a lot of sparks were going off in that game. You had, Seattle had to burn 2 subs in the first half. And I think that really hurt them, especially when one's Marshall, your defender, and Roland, your midfielder, attacking midfielder kind of a guy. Both of them have to go off. So then after getting the early lead and really quieting and tempering the Portland crowd, they were some bad breaks for them. And then Portland were able to get themselves back into the game and were able to take a 2-1 advantage into halftime. And we're looking really good. They're playing really well. Second half, kind of back and forth. Both teams had their chances. Milano actually gets a third goal for Portland. It's called rightfully offsides. So this is the game that's, I think the second leg is going to be the most interesting. Number one, it is a rivalry game, like you said. Number two, Portland is going into it with a goal advantage. Seattle does have an away goal advantage, though, so that makes it interesting. And they play on Thursday. Everybody else plays on Sunday, so their recovery is a lot shorter. So I think that'll be something to keep an eye on, especially with the injuries that Seattle picked up.
Yeah, let's talk about those Seattle injuries. Cristian Roldan with a groin injury, Chad Marcel with a right knee injury. According to Schmetzer after the game, though, it's not a ligament tear, so Marshall may or may not be back for the next leg. But for Roldan, he will be fine, according to Schmetzer after the game. So there's a higher probability of Roldan being back in the second leg than there is for Marshall. That being said, you saw a lot of opportunities. Diego Valeri continues to create offensive opportunities for this Portland squad. That other players are stepping up now and finishing, which is something that Portland really struggled with mid-season, of creating opportunities and then doing nothing with them. Now they're finally stepping up and they're able to do the 1-2, pick up the trash, kind of Mighty Ducks it, where you're literally taking the trash out from in front of the net off of a good shot opportunity, forcing a good a good save and then creating something off the post or off the rebound or something, or just finding a better passing opportunity once you get inside the box. And that's something that Portland was missing at some point during the season. I think it's one of the reasons why they fell back so far down the standings and had to kind of climb back up to where they were at the end of the season. But now with Seattle where they're at, I mean, Portland's got to be having all momentum in there. I think going back to the discussion, though, is how big is the momentum going into the second leg in Seattle when it's a rivalry matchup?
Yeah, the adjustments will be interesting to see what each team does. I think the advantage, it is a minimal advantage. It's still an advantage, but it's an advantage where you pretty much have to play a game when if you're Portland, you can't play for a draw. You can't play you have to kind of play it to win the game regardless. So but it's good. They're creating good chances. Valeri has been fantastic for them again this year. Blanco has really stepped up for them in the last couple of months. He got the second goal today. And there seems to be just a little, they made some changes midway through the season, and there was some recuperation time where they brought back Villafana from Mexico, from Santos, a player that helped them win the MLS Cup a few years ago. He's new coach. He's taking some time to find how that works with him. They switched Valentine from the left-hand side to the right-hand side to try to play both him and Villafana together, and that's taken a little time as well. You had Guzman leave for the World Cup. He's back now, and he's kind of settled a little bit as well. So I think these midseason struggles have kind of gone out of the way now, and they are playing a little better. Each player kind of knows their role really a little better now than they did halfway through the season when there was some changes and some players missing. So I think that helps when it comes to can they keep the momentum going into the second leg.
All right, we talked about the West. Let's head to the East. Let's start with the upset over the favorite win. Columbus Crew continues their tear. Columbus actually the 5 seed in the East right now. Nobody really expected them to continue on at this point, especially with how DC United was rolling going into the playoffs. And then all of a sudden, Columbus Crew continues to grind and grind and grind and show why the Crew is one of the better postseason teams that you'll find in MLS. Crew continued that with a 1-0 win over the New York Red Bulls, the record-setting number 1 seed New York Red Bulls, courtesy of a 61st minute score from Zardes. When looking at this matchup as you're going into the second leg, once again, against New York Red Bulls, a team that is so good, and it kind of got lost in how talented this team was up until pretty much the last 2 weeks of the season when Atlanta started to falter a little bit. But the Columbus Crew continues to be right there, and we're talking about momentum and stuff like that. What is the momentum that you see coming along for Columbus going into the second leg, and how did it impact their first leg win?
I mean, that win in DC was huge. And the game today was probably the worst game out of all the 4 games today. It was pretty boring. You're talking about 2 of the best defensive teams in the league. I'm pretty sure New York Red Bulls had the lowest goals allowed. The Crew had more goals allowed than goals scored. They had a negative goal differential, but they made it this far because of their strong defense. So I think this kind of expected this can be a more cagier match. So if you're Columbus Crew, you want to keep grinding out wins. That is your style. That's kind of been your MO, and you're not flashy. The goal, nice little back heel from Higuain that allowed Zaros to kind of open up and get in front of goal. That's kind of been flashy, but they're grinding out a lot of it. They're grinding out the games. They're working really hard. And I think if you're New York Red Bulls, you kind of you don't hit the panic button yet. It's a 1-0 win, it's a 1-0 loss for you away. You go back home, you take the solace that you have the confidence in yourself that you have been so consistent all year that you can get a result that you need at home, whether it's 1-0, 2-0, whatever the goal line is. That you don't hit the panic button yet. You went away, the home team stood their ground and got a result at home like they wanted. So now it's your turn to do that, I guess I would say, if you're the Red Bulls.
And that's the thing, is that they didn't concede an away goal. So, I mean, that at least in terms of like a worst case scenario type thing for Columbus, they still have a little bit of an advantage in their back heel to continue with things moving forward in their momentum. The thing is about Columbus is that we've talked so much about the save the crew moment and what was going to happen with Berhalter after the season was over. And now all of a sudden a team like Columbus has some momentum that we haven't seen from them so far. They are cagier. They are more defensive minded. They are grinded out. They are your typical MLS soccer program that when you talk about styles of soccer coming forward, Columbus Crew embodies that yet once again this season with this roster. The problem is that when you're going up against guys like Bradley Wright Phillips, and you're going up against Kaku, and you start thinking about some of the people that they have on that Red Bulls roster that can put goals in the back of the net at seemingly a drop of the hat, you have to be concerned. And I'm starting to wonder if there's going to be a moment of clarity that will pop up for either side. Either there's going to be a tactical, immediate, fatal flaw almost. I could see that really happening. I could see a fatal flaw from Columbus, like almost trying to be a little bit too much on their back heels, set up a bad formation that doesn't play to their strengths, like a 1-5-4 or something, and then get too safe. And we see this plenty of times in there, and especially with the Berhalter conspiracy theories going on, it will be interesting to see whether or not that mental breakdown actually happens with Columbus, because Columbus could try to do too much in the adjustments and really set themselves up for failure. While New York, at least the only pressure that New York Red Bulls has right now is the fact that they're the 1 seed, that they're expected to make it out of this round regardless of who they were going to play. The expectations is what could hurt them, not necessarily a coaching advantage, not necessarily a player-on-player advantage. So you have all these other kind of things where if they can get the mental fortitude, New York Red Bulls should go out there and win this game and therefore win the series. And I think that's something that could really help out the Red Bulls moving forward.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I think, it's this is a very interesting tie in the atmosphere as well, in something that I noticed, because, Portland and Seattle was packed. It's going to be packed both places. It was packed today. Good crowd today in Real Salt Lake. You expect a good crowd in Sport in Kansas City. Atlanta is going to be firing to go when they return home. New York FC gets a good crowd. Today was pretty empty, and it was not empty in Columbus, not the way it was in Dallas on Wednesday for a wild card game between the Portland and Dallas, but it was still not full. It wasn't what I was expecting for Columbus, especially after the whole Save the Crew movement. They get that wild card victory. They do have some momentum. And then I'll be interested to see the crowd in New York for that game too, because it's one of not the most intimidating locations to play in the MLS. So that'll be interesting. I think something to keep an eye on too. But yeah, this one is really up in the balance, because neither team or especially Columbus, if they're asked to score goals, it's going to be a struggle for them. So I think for them, it's going to be, how long can you hold on to the advantage you have? And do you have a plan B when you need it? And can you adjust it to find that extra goal to push ahead?
Let's switch over boroughs. Let's go to the different New York City team. NYCFC lost 1-0 in Yankee Stadium to Atlanta United. It wasn't necessarily the high-scoring event that I thought this was going to be. I thought this was going to be more like a 3-2 victory on Atlanta's behalf. The result's still there, but not nearly as many goals as I expected, especially from the Pinstripes. I really expected them to be able to get a goal at home, and they weren't able to do that. Instead, there was a lot of good possession, a lot of good passing that you saw from Atlanta that showed a lot of really good possession and good opportunities for Almiron and other players, with Martinez just continuing to do what they've expected of. But it was an unsuspecting hero in Eric Remedy that scored his first professional goal of his career. late in the first half, 37th minute, to be the only tally in this game. And it was the difference maker for Atlanta. And you got such a weird scenario that now you go down to Atlanta. The only thing that can save New York City FC is a win. And man, I don't know. I don't think this is a good thing for NYCFC. I think Atlanta's got this in the bag. Is there anything that you can see that would change that perspective?
No, I actually agree with you. And it's funny because we've been talking about how do we carry momentum from one game to the other, this and that. And New York FC played fantastic in their wild card game when they won 3-1 and were spectacular. And then you had Atlanta, kind of fumble away the supporters shield at the end. And we questioned if they'd be able to recuperate in time for this matchup. And it looked like New York FC were in a good position to get a good result at home after their great win midweek in the wild card playoff match. And so then we've been talking about momentum, and then all of a sudden, both momentums, the good and the bad, have been blown out the water in this first leg with Atlanta leaving with a 1-0 win. So sometimes we care too much about momentum sometimes, and it kind of been proven here where Atlanta were able to recuperate and get a very professional and a very, impressive win away to carry back home. And, now if we're going to go back to momentum, yeah, it's all theirs now. And that stadium is going to be ready to rock. New York City FC is going to have to get out of their shell to try to get a result because they need goals now. And it sets it up perfectly for, I think, what Atlanta wants to do. And with their attacking options and their flair and what they do with the ball, this game could really open up for them. And it could be a great message for them entering the Eastern Conference Finals, because I think they're in a good place for it now. Out of the four groups, the four matchups, the one who looks most likely to advance and the one with the least questions.
And that ultimately is the big question: is what do you know the most about these teams moving forward? And with the upsets, with the momentum, with the first leg in the books, there's still lots of questions left on all fronts to see what's going to happen at this point. One thing that I do want to bring up, though, before moving on a little bit forward, is that Atlanta is historically bad for winning championships. Whether it's been the Hawks or the Thrashers when they still had an NHL team down there, or the Braves winning all of those divisional titles and making the World Series twice and winning only once. There's a lot of things in Atlanta that says do not win championships. I think their most recent championship out of all the ones that they could really kind of hold their hat on would be the Georgia Swarm, which is box lacrosse. They relocated from Minnesota to Atlanta. So Atlanta is championship hungry. And with how Atlanta stumbled down the end, it would be fitting for them to rebound, get back underneath their feet, and win an MLS title. Columbus and New York will be 7:30 Eastern Time on FS1 on the 11th. Also on the 11th, Atlanta NYC FC. That's at 5. 3 o'clock is the Sporting KC Real Salt Lake matchup. Both of those will be on ESPN. And Seattle and Portland will be at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time on FS1. That game will be on Thursday. We're going to take a quick break, and then when we return, we will talk about the Copa Libertadores. There we go. I got it right this time. Had a little Spanish lesson beforehand to try to get that right. But we'll be talking about that in segment 2 coming up next. You're listening to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. Welcome back to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. We are on social media as well. Would like to hear from you. Don't be afraid to interact with Your Soccer Passport on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Yvonne, we got a big matchup coming from South America. The Copa Libertadores final is upon us. It is a big deal with lots of implications because it is a Super Clasico. an amazing derby match on top of being a major trophy to be won in the soccer world. Ivan, break it down to us exactly what's going on in this case. First off, with what are they playing for, and then we can kind of go more into the rivalry between the two teams at hand.
Yeah, so there's kind of two things here. First, you have the Copa Libertadores, which is the Champions League of South America. It's to see who the best club team in South America is, and the format's a little different, a little kookier than the Champions League. Mexico used to be part of it; they're no longer part of it. And you have the regular group stage, and you have a knockout stage as well. And from there, the final is a two-legged final. I mean, it's prestigious. I think by saying it's the Champions League equivalent of South America, you kind of get how big of a deal it is. I mean, all the most popular teams and the teams people know from South America, from Colo-Colo in Chile, Boca Junior, River Plate, who we'll get to in a second, Santos in Brazil. The names go on, the teams who try to win this and the teams who do win this. And for the first time ever, you now have a Super Clasico between River Plate and Boca Junior, which, quite frankly, you could make the argument is the biggest rivalry in soccer. It's up there with Real Madrid Barcelona. It's up there with Rangers Celtic in terms of disdain and dislike people have within those communities for each other. The two teams are from Buenos Aires, Argentina. River Plate kind of gets the kind of early reputation of their nicknames are the Millionaires, los Millonarios, kind of the more when they were coming up, the bougie of the two teams, I guess. Boca Juniors playing El Bombonero, probably the most intimidating, the most spectacular place to watch a soccer game at, kind of known as the team of the poor, during the early foundation of the clubs. So that's kind of the inner aspects of the two clubs. And this is the first time they're going to meet in a Champions League or in a Copa Libertadores finals. Just kind of get you an idea of the disdain they have for each other. A couple of years ago, they met in a knockout stage, and in a knockout stage game, and in the second leg, River Plate had the advantage. Second half is about to start, and if for people who haven't watched South American soccer, a lot of the times they will have these kind of inflatable kind of tunnels that they pop out for the players to walk out of onto the field to kind of protect them from any debris or anything that could be thrown on them or anything like that. The River Plate players were coming out, and then someone kind of poked a hole in it in the thing and sprayed the entire team with pepper spray. So these are passionate and fans, and I think this is important. That comment I think is important too, because I think the people from the Copa Libertadores, CONMEBOL, the federation of it, and Argentine soccer, they want this to be ran as smoothly as possible. They want to avoid any possible, altercations in these stadiums, outside the stadiums, on the field, because now the whole world's watching, and this might be the most popular Copa Libertadores finals ever, just because of the two teams playing in it. And these are two teams that are very well known around the world. They're kind of pretty more recognizable. Even if you don't follow Argentine soccer, you still kind of know Boca Juniors, and you kind of know about River Plate. So now there's going to be more attention than usual, I think. It's no longer a regional thing or a America's thing. This is more of a world thing where people are going to see both of these legs with key eye on everything because of everything that we've just mentioned, because of the rivalry, the intensity of it, because it is the biggest trophy in South American club soccer or American soccer in general. It's way above the CONCACAF Champions League, just because of the quality of teams and because of the disdain and the intensity of this rivalry. This is really going to put a lot of world eye on this, and it's important for Latin soccer, Argentine soccer, South American soccer, that it does run as smoothly as possible and passion does not turn into violence.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. As much as it's nice to talk about these things and the big laugh from Ivan pops up, but the wonders of again, using Squadcast that allows you to have a video feed of your your co-hosts as well, kind of share some of that kind of stuff. But ultimately, that's not going to happen in these two teams because they have a historical notion for hatred of each other. But you also start seeing now what this rivalry means in terms of application of the challenge. To kind of bring it back in a little bit to give a comparison that is near and dear to both of our hearts here is a hockey relation. Ivan's girlfriend is a MSU Mankato alumna. I am an alumnus of Northern Michigan University, and Northern Michigan University held a championship game last year with an NCAA berth on the line between them and their rivals Michigan Tech. Michigan Tech actually knocking out MSU Mankato the weekend before. And to see that, we had a number of arrests in Marquette just from Michigan Tech and Northern Michigan fans getting into fights with each other. I thought it was odd because I've been in that arena that has hosted World Cups, short track speed skating, professional events, the Harlem Globetrotters, that kind of stuff. And I've never seen an arena get that insane for matching a rivalry with what's on the line. And when you put the two of them together, it's always exceptionally difficult, especially when you start knowing and recognizing some of the players that are out on the pitch, which one of them have Argentine backgrounds, which one of them can kind of come into things. And there's already been lots of issues, namely on the River Plate side. River Plate required a red card from Gremio in the second leg of the semifinals to get to this point. Gremio had the 1-0 advantage going into leg 2. River Plate's won 2-1. After Gremio got a red card, Gremio actually had applied for that game to be appealed because of some substitution and suspension rules that were done by River coach Marcelo Gallardo during that game. But CONMEBOL said, nope, we're not going to listen. And it set up this whole big deal. So now not only do you have all the things that have led up to this beforehand, but you've got more questions about River Plate going into things. You've got Boca Juniors that had a 2-2 tie in the second leg. They just kind of coasted into this final. Now it's all about what's on the pitch. It's all about what these teams have to bring against each other. And that's what makes this part really exciting. Let's actually talk about what's going to happen on the pitch. What teams, what players, what styles should we be paying attention to? Because I'm really excited to see if Boca Juniors can get enough goals in, because I think the higher scoring match is gonna go more to Juniors. And if it's 2-2 or less, then River Plate, I think, really has an advantage here. And I'm not sure what to really expect from either side, just because it is such a screwed up scenario in what is a match of the century with all the things put together.
Yeah, you make a good point about the semifinal of River Plate and how, South American soccer just can't get outside of their own foot of looking just shady when things happening. But on the field itself, before you get to that part, let me just clarify something real fast. Without even necessarily looking shady, just that there was that level of drama. It doesn't even have to look shady, because I looked at that red card. The red card's legit, but there were some concerns about the suspension aspects, but that had very little to do with the actual gameplay. This was, the gameplay wasn't affected so much as the red card was affected. So, when you get into to everything coming along, it's more about all right, there's no momentum. There's no momentum from these semifinals going into this game, because everything else is just such a cluster of emotions that you don't know what to really expect, even though that any one of us, whether we're talking about MLS or we're talking about CONCACAF Champions League, if this was in the Europa Nations League and we were talking about a team requiring a red card to move along to the next stage, we'd be saying momentum, like it was the biggest deal in the world. And there was this massive red card situation that doesn't even apply, just because of how crazy this game's going to be. And you talked about the eyes of the world is going to be on Argentine soccer because of this. And now it's just
what is going on, because there's so many factors about what to look forward to that, again, we can't even lead up into the game without saying, no, this wasn't as big of a factor as this was, when, X is a bigger deal than Y, or Y is a bigger deal than X, when really there's still an incredible game to be left to play. Boca Juniors and River Plate are amazing teams in their own right, and that just kind of points out just a little bit more to drive home that point that we spent the first 10 minutes in this extra long show about, just how big of a deal this rivalry is and what it comes down to on the pitch. And it makes it more exciting because there's more ways for fans to join in and love it. And I feel like I'm going to watch this game and I'm going to identify with the team, and I'm going to go out and buy their jersey with whoever I like after this is over, more than any other game that I've ever seen, with the exception of maybe the Earthquake Galaxy game where Ricketts got his arm basically blown up. So like it's going to be a big one. This is going to be huge. I'm super excited for it, and I'm just wondering how many players are going to still be remaining out on the field at the end of this.
I mean, yeah, like you said, a lot of it, what's going to happen on the field is a lot of it's going to be influenced by outside the field and what the fans are going to bring to it. I mean, the first leg I think is going to be in River Plate Stadium, so it's important for them to get a result. The first leg is the 10th. The second leg is the 24th, if I'm correct. Some players to watch out for River Plate. I think you have this 20-year-old Esquivel Palacios, who has been fantastic for them. And, they've been having this good run in the Copa Libertadores, but they're like 9th right now in the Argentine League. So, and Boca Juniors is not much better, just 6th. But still, both of them are only really a couple results away from being right up in the thick of it for second place in the Argentine League. So this right now, because both of them are kind of struggling or aren't playing up to the level they expect, this is a huge game for them to, not only take bragging rights and be the champions of South America again, but to, also help them in the domestic cup. So a player to watch out for in River Plate is Esquivel Palacios, 20-year-old. He's already gotten interest that looks like from European clubs like Real Madrid, an exciting midfielder. And he was really the catalyst that kind of helped them propel to where they are now. Boca Juniors, on the other hand, you have some players that you'll recognize, like Carlos Tevez from Man United and Man City. You have Fernando Gago, who used to play for Real Madrid, and then you got players like Dario Benedetto, who, from people who watch Mexico, remember him from his time with Club America and clubs like Tijuana, I believe. And he's been kind of the one who he scored the clinching goal to kind of set to move Boca Juniors along. And he's been playing fantastic for them and providing, timely goals and really been carrying them when they needed to find goals. So there's some players to watch as well. I mean, and yeah, it's going to be intense and it's going to be tight. And I don't think it's going to be a lot of. I'll be more cagey than it will be open. I think it won't be free flowing. I think it'll be a lot more cagier, especially the first leg, because neither team will want to play to expose themselves so much. They want to set themselves up to have to play for everything in the second leg. So watch for a cagey affair. Don't expect this wide open game. I don't think, and you don't usually find wide open games in finals, but especially in a 2-legged final where I think these guys know each other so well. It will be interesting to see how if they're able to kind of if they're playing more to, let's not lose it in the first leg. Let's try to set everything up for the second leg. But if we can get a result and get some momentum, let's do that.
When you talk about as a player, and that's kind of the unique odd couple aspect that we have on this show, as a player, how much discipline is needed to really make sure that you're not going to lose this all in the first leg, in the first 10 minutes, and get a red card scenario? I mean, with all those emotions, with all those X factors off the field in a rivalry matchup where you're going to want to go out swinging punches, how do you prepare? How do you, as a leader, make sure that you actually do what you just said, to be defensive minded, to be cagey, to make sure that you're not losing the entire thing early on, despite all those emotions?
Yeah, to find the balance between not saying be defensive, but being cagey and not making mistakes, to playing, to playing too tight and where you just don't try to play for anything at all. It's a really hard balance to do, but I think that's where you need the leaders of both teams to kind of get everybody in the right mentality and let them know this isn't a one. This is embrace the momentum, embrace the atmosphere, and be motivated and be, help that push you through, but recognize that you can lose this game in the 10th minute with something stupid. You could also lose it in the 70th minute doing something stupid after you've had battles throughout the game with somebody, after you've been mentally fatigued, after you've had, already so much time of emotions go through you. Keeping the level head is something that that the leaders need to show why they're leaders on these teams and help. You don't want to hold back a young player from playing with emotion and playing with, gravitas or anything like that, because that's why they got to that level. But you also want to make sure that that it's not wasted energy, that they're doing it with purpose. So how you do that is, each player reacts to it differently and reacts to pressure differently and will react to the environment differently. So it's hard to say, but, it's a really, can the coach kind of have a level head? Can the leaders on team have a level head to find that balance between being cagey and fighting and not being too tight, and then also, taking advantages when they come, being the ones who can lead and take hold of the game. And once you kind of take hold of the game, that's when you can really start doing what you want to do. So, I mean, it's why they play at that level and why I don't, because they're able to figure it out a little better than I could besides other things. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and that'll be fascinating. The mental aspect of this finals will be interesting too.
Absolutely, and I'm glad that you were able to get that player insight. I mean, I was a runner, so I mean, the sport difference is a huge aspect involved too. So an individual sport compared to a team sport is such a big deal, and I'm glad that you're able to provide that insight. Don't knock yourself too much down just because of the level that you play at. So we love you, Ivan. You mean a lot to us.
Oh,
You're special. Yeah, no problem. All right, so we're going to take a quick break because this show has gone super long, like ridiculously long. But if we don't talk about the Chinese Super League, we're not going to talk about the Chinese Super League. So we got to do it this show. We are going to take a quick break. Worldwide Headlines is next with an important new sponsor for the Worldwide Headlines segment. You got to pay attention to that. You're listening to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. Now time for Worldwide Headlines here on Your Soccer Passport, a segment touching on some of the other big news from around the soccer world. Teams for the new USL 1 are being announced. USL 1 is part of a new movement to add a more established tiered system to the USL, the primary minor league affiliate of MLS Soccer. USL 1 will be the lowest of the tiers. Half the teams are expansions in soccer-stable areas like Chattanooga, Tennessee, Lansing, Michigan, and Madison, Wisconsin, while half of the league are existing teams like the Richmond Kickers, Toronto FC2, and FC Tucson. Across the pond, Newcastle United and Huddersfield both won this week, meaning every team in the English Premier League has a win. Newcastle upset Watford at home, while Huddersfield beat Fulham on Monday night, both teams winning 1-0. The victory changes up the bottom of the table with the last 7 teams now all within 3 points, a third of the way through the season. And Wayne Rooney will play one more time for the Three Lions as he will get his 120th and final cap on November 15th with England. Rooney hasn't represented his country since a UK tilt with Scotland in November of 2016. He is the all-time goal scorer for the English with 53 goals. The location and opponent of the game is also a fitting send-off, as Wembley was the host stadium the last time he represented England, and they will be playing against the United States, host country to his new club, DC United. Today's Worldwide Headlines are brought to you by the Public House Media's celebration of their jump to a new merchandise promoter, TeePublic. The best way to promote your soccer passport and any other PHM shows is with t-shirts, mugs, wall art, and more, all available in the TeePublic shop. Visit teepublic.com/pubhousemedia. That's teepublic.com. Welcome back to Your Soccer Passport as we are here, Ivan Sanchez Carrasco, and I am Brice Burge. You're welcome to find us on Twitter. He is Ivan Sanchez C90. I am at that Brice Burge, Brice with an I, but maybe I shouldn't tell you that because we are going to butcher some pronunciations as we really make sure that the worldwide aspect of Your Soccer Passport is upheld. I've already blamed Baxter Colburn for this extensively on Facebook, so he knows. He knows that this is coming. So we've got some big matchups that are coming up, including one that happened just 12 hours before we recorded this. A massive 5-4 battle between the top two teams in Shanghai East Asia and Guangzhou Evergrande FC. Shanghai ended up winning 5-4. Both teams exchanged some penalty kicks. Both teams benefited from an own goal scenario, as well as just some beautiful play in and out of the box, some set pieces that didn't go in. This was a close matchup, and it was a lot of fun for anybody. So if you get a chance to just watch like an instant classic scenario, this is one for you to watch. After the game, had some interesting feedback from the manager of Guangzhou Evergrande FC because they are actually the 7-time champions of this league. And they really needed the win to continue that along, looking at the table. Ivan, what did you kind of get from this game as you're kind of looking at the box sheet here?
Box sheet wise, for a soccer standpoint wise, this is a great game for the Chinese Super League because this is kind of one of those leagues who've been buying up a lot of players. It's really opening up the bank to bring in players. Some recognizable players from both teams. Guangzhou's Evergrande. You're pronouncing it better than I am. Some players you'd recognize there. Paulinho, who played in the World Cup for Brazil this last year. You have on Shanghai, you have Hulk and you have Oscar, two other Brazilians who are very well known. Both of them have played in World Cups. And the fact that these are your two main teams and they're battling it out and they just put on a barn burner with 2 games left in the season. Like, if you're the Chinese Super League, there was really nothing more you could ask for in that regard. So that's awesome. If you're Evergrande FC, you had more shots. You had more shots on target. You had more possession. You had 65% of the possession. You had almost 200 more passes than they did. You had 171 more passes than they did. And you still lost 4-5. So, that's kind of the big aspect of it. And the way it kind of sets up for them the remaining 2 games of the season, Shanghai looks like they're so close to wrapping it up. It would be it'd be a huge choke job if they let this this 5-point lead on top of the table go with 2 games left, really.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. You only need 1 point because that was a big deal behind this game. If this was a draw or it flipped the other way, now these teams are really close with each other. You could have actually saw Evergrande jump Shanghai East Asia to get that top spot, but now it's a 5-point difference with 2 games left, and they play 2 games in a week. So with that matchup, Shanghai East Asia has Beijing Ring, which sits 8th at the table, a story in mediocrity at 9-9-10, and then they're playing the 10th team on the table in Tijuana Qingjing, who's 8-12. So neither of those teams really have a lot to play for. On the other side, though, you have Guangzhou Evergrande, who's playing against the 14th and the 15th ranked teams in a 16-team table. And this is huge because if you look at this table with 2 weeks to go, with 2 games to go, from 9th place to 15th is separated by 3 points. Now, statistically, with the way that the table and the schedule is set up, only number 10 Tijan Quanjin is able to actually make sure that they're not relegatable. And the reason why is because the 16th spot is locked in place. 21 points is what Quizhao Zhaisheng, which is 6-3-19. They are a negative 29 goal differential. They are by far and away the worst team in the Chinese Super League. But Tianjin Teda is 7-8-13. So is Guangxing Lifan, and both of those teams are the ones that are playing Guangzhou Evergrande FC. So even though Evergrande has the capability, if they win both their games and their teams lower down the table, teams that you would expect Guangzhou Evergrande to beat, they're not necessarily easy wins because now this late in the season, they're still relegation potential. On the other side, Shanghai East does not have that because Beijing Rain has 36 points. They're just there. They do have a little bit to play for. They could finish as high as 6th place if they win their games. And Shanghai Shenshu continues to not win either of their upcoming games. They can draw both, but they can't win both. They can't win either. Beijing Rain has the opportunity to move a little bit forward. Tijan Quinjan was the team that we had mentioned earlier, cannot be relegated because of the way that the schedule falls. That's just the stars aligning in the right way. So when you're talking about the Chinese Super League, a league that ultimately, in my opinion, I think is probably the 6th best league in the world. You've got the English Premier League, you've got Bundesliga, you've got Liga MX, you've got Series A. Depending on what day of the week is, you don't know where the French League's going to be. But the MLS and the Chinese Super League, I think, are pretty on par with each other. I think the Chinese Super League has bigger star disparity in terms of the best players on a roster compared to the worst players on the roster, where in the U.S. and MLS, I think, is a little bit closer together. But the Chinese Super League is an amazing league in its own right. And for them to be approaching this late stages with so much on the line, there's just a lot to be dealing with, which I think is going to be super interesting following up with all this other kind of stuff. Because, again, when you've got so many teams, just 32 points is what Dalian Urban, Tijan Quinjan, and Gongzhou are in F half. 31 points is 12th and 13th on the table, and Changchun Yaite and Henan Yaini. And then 14th and 15th, Lafon and Teda are at 29. And so there's lots of games still coming up, which will be played this Wednesday and Sunday. That is when the table will be set. That is also to be noted, that is kind of on the next day ahead type timeline in terms of where on the earth China is. So like you kind of got to think about it. It's going to be almost like late Tuesday night and late Saturday night that these results will be coming in. So there's a lot to be paying attention with that as well. Yvonne, did you have anything else that you wanted to add on the Chinese Super League before moving forward?
No, I think we made the points about like what the league has tried to do the last couple of years with this influx of money, a lot of money. Something that helps them compared to the MLS is that there's not a salary cap in that regard, and they're kind of able to spend freely the way they were, which is how they've been able to attract players like Oscar who are in their prime to move from the day-to-day life of wanting to live in England or something and move to China to play soccer and make more money. That's interesting. I think that this has been a good result for them, for the league. The fact that they do have their two marquee teams battling for the playoffs, battling to get in there with the big names. We compare. There is some similarities to this and that league and the MLS, and I think you also see why people kind of want relegation in soccer, because you just mentioned how these teams in last place have nothing to battle, have something to play for, because they could go down a league or they could stay up, and teams in American sports don't really have that problem. If halfway through the season they know their season's over, they're already planning vacation with a couple days left. So I mean, it's been good, and the Chinese Super League is a fun league when you're able to get a hold of it, because the fans, they're building kind of fans from the ground up too in this regard, and they're making a huge influx in to try to bring the popularity of soccer up. China is, because I'm pretty sure basketball is probably their most popular sport, and the way the NBA has kind of been able to gravitas and reach so many hands and be so popular with their players over there. So the fact that you are seeing the Chinese Super League grow, and they are winning, they're competing in the Asia Champions League, and they're playing in things like the Club World Cup and things like that. That just helps the sport grow, and it gets better. And it's good for the Chinese league too. And hopefully you kind of start seeing in the future the Chinese players also improving and getting better, and then you see, and from there it goes to the national team, and then now improves, and now they're hopefully battling for World Cup spots too. So all around, good for China and Chinese soccer.
Yeah, I think it's good for China as a whole too. China's got a really weird sport scenario. I think and I don't want to say weird, but it is different. In China, the top 3 sports that you have are women's hockey, basketball, and again, men's hockey, because of the influence of the KHL in China right now too. So there are a lot of things that are changing around. So now that you've got the Chinese Super League growing the way that it is, and more importantly, I think this is the best thing, is that if Shanghai East Asia doesn't have the choke job of the century in this Chinese Super League, Guangzhou Evergrande FC is not the champion for the first time in 7 years. They have won the last 7 titles. It is not good for a league to have the same team win that many times in a row. Even when you're talking about like the NFL with the Patriots, there were other teams that kind of jointed in around with them, or the NFC team won the other time around. But when you saw in NASCAR where Jimmy Johnson won 5 straight, and then all of a sudden people aren't paying attention to NASCAR anymore, dynasties of that level of excellence does hurt a sport. It's good that Evergrande FC is not your champion this year, and that is good for soccer as a whole, especially for a country like China that can bring so much to the table in terms of money and in terms of eyeballs, because they're paying attention. And now that they got a local product that's only going to make the sport grow in a way that you didn't think the world's most popular sport could have grown. It's a win for soccer. It's got to be a win for all of us.
Yeah, 100% agree. And it's good for them, and it's hopefully they in the next generation you see the influx of this and it continues to grow. So yeah, all totally on board with you.
All right, so that's how we're going to wrap this up. This has been an exceptionally long episode of Your Soccer Passport, and we appreciate you for staying along this entire time. We'll have some updates for you on the Worldwide Headlines segment about the Chinese Super League next week. Obviously, pay attention to the MLS playoffs as they come along, and you're welcome to listen to any of our past episodes of Your Soccer Passport on whatever platform your favorite podcasts are found, like iTunes, Spotify, and Spreaker.com. You've been listening to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. Yvonne, what's your shout out this week?
Shout out my old high school, Corvallis High School Spartans, in the 5A Oregon semifinals. They were finalists last year. They have their semifinals Tuesday when this comes out. If they win, they will play the 5A finals on Saturday. So shout out to Chad Foley. He used to coach me when I was a kid. We became good buddies. So good on him leading Corvallis High School to the semifinals again and what he's doing there. So yeah, go Sparks.
All right, if we're doing alma maters the high school style, I do have to give a quick shout out to my marching band who made the state finals in Indiana. Indiana marching bands are like soccer teams in Oregon and Washington. It's a big deal. It's a huge deal. So congratulations to the Marching Red Devils as they go to states. And then after that, they're going straight down to Disney World, and they're going to perform down at Mickey Ears Park. So we'll see how they do down there, and good luck to them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, shout out.
All right. Yeah. Shout out. All right, that's how we're going to end it. You've been listening to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media.